G'day YouTube, Warbles on a lot here, with an update on the Richard Torbay Chronicles. Now, for those of you who haven't been following, I live in the electorate of Northern Tablelands in the New South Wales elections, and I live in the electorate of New England in the Australian federal elections. And my federal member is a bloke called Tony Windsor. My state member was a bloke called Richard Torbay. Richard Torbay startled everybody 3 weeks ago by standing down from his candidacy for the federal election, where he was going to come up head to head against Tony Windsor. He also stood down as an independent member of the New South Wales Parliament, and he resigned from the National Party and he resigned as Chancellor of the University of New England. This came as a great, terrible shock to a lot of people, but I was one of those who've been sort of waiting for a long time to see Richard Torbay come undone, because I've known for a long time that he had a few hidden character traits. Now, I first noticed this when I went to meet him when he opened an office in Glen Innes when he was standing for election in State Parliament the first time. I told him I was interested to hear what his environmental policies were, and he looked me in the eye and he shook me by the hand and he told me what he thought I wanted to hear, and he gave me his brochure, and I went home and I found that his environmental policy is, if it moves, shoot it; if it doesn't move, chop it down; if you can't get your axe into it, try dynamite, or dig it up, or sell it, or rent it for advertising space. He's not actually particularly interested in green issues. Okay, fine. And I was also aware that when he was the mayor, he'd managed to employ a road safety officer originally intended to be shared between Armidale Council, Guyra Council and Demerrick Council, with the RTA paying half the wages and the other three councils, or the three councils, sharing half the wages between them. But Richard Torbay conducted interviews without inviting the RTA or the other councils, and Guyra had already backed out. Demerrick said, no thanks, we didn't get to interview the applicants, so we're not going to pay anything. And the RTA was stuck with paying half the wages, and Armidale was stuck with paying half the wages. And that to me is not impeccable managerial practice. That to me is slipshod silliness. So we won't go into what the outcome was when they had to abolish the position to get rid of the candidate. But anyway, suffice to say that I've been watching Richard Torbay, and for a long time I've been aware that that raccoon-like Prozac mask looked as if he was dealing with an awful lot of stress, and he sort of seemed to me to be a hunted individual, haunted, worried that somebody was going to find him out one day. Well, they did. Anyway, there's been some updates in the newspapers, so let's see what they have to say. April 6/7 Sydney Morning Herald, and he's on the front page. He could charm the knickers off a nun. Well, it can be done, but you wind up having to marry the nun. However, question time. Richard Torbay in State Parliament in 2008 when he was Speaker of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly. And I think you'll find that little tattoo there is a Lebanese Maronite Christian affectation. Exclusive by Kate McClymont. As the mystery surrounding the whereabouts of former parliamentarian Richard Torbay deepens, a Herald investigation has uncovered links between Mr Torbay and his associates and a number of Centrelink leases across the country totalling almost $48 million. Quote, he could charm the knickers off a nun, unquote, said one of his former parliamentary colleagues who, like Mr Torbay's constituents, is shocked by Mr Torbay's remarkable fall from grace. It is now 18 days since Mr Torbay resigned from State Parliament as Chancellor of the University of New England after allegations concerning him were referred to the Independent Commission Against Corruption. While Mr Torbay has gone to ground, revelations about his vast real estate empire and his business interests are coming to light. Mr Torbay has investments in 3 buildings that have Centrelink leases worth more than $11 million. Those investments are held through development companies run by his business partner, property developer Nick Rice. Mr Torbay's wife Rosemary and close friend and former local police chief David Cushway. The Department of Human Services has more than 700 leases across Australia. As far as the department is aware, Mr Torbay only has an interest in 3 of these, Wynnum, Dalby and Kurri Kurri. A spokesman for the department said, Mr Torbay was not party to the 3 original developments when they went through open tender. He purchased part leases at a later date, said the spokesman, who did not comment on the 14 leases that Mr Torbay's associates have. The Centrelink offices, which have leases worth $48 million, are in Gosford, Kurri Kurri, Deniliquin, Moree, Glen Innes, woohoo, my hometown, Gunnedah, Wallsend, Armidale, as well as in the Queensland towns of Hervey Bay, Dalby, Maryborough, Wynnum and Woolridge and Tennant Creek in the Northern Territory. Most of the buildings were purchased by Mr Rice or companies associated with his friend and former campaign manager, Philip Hanna. Within months of the purchases, lucrative leases were secured with the federal government agency Centrelink, which is responsible for social security payments. Mr Torbay also co-owns a building in Dengar Street in Armidale, which is leased to a credit union. The lease, worth $1.6 million, was signed in December 2007. At the time, Mr Torbay was Speaker of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly. The credit union's then head, Kevin Toupe, what a funny name, Toupe, what a dupe, is also a director of one of Mr Hanna's family companies. He was appointed to the Council of the University of New England in 2009 when Mr Torbay was Chancellor. Mr Torbay's son Joel is employed by the credit union. Mr Torbay and his wife also have interest in several Armidale shops. Police sources said they were horrified when they discovered that within hours of the 2007 arrest of Mr Hanna for attempted murder, their boss David Cushway organised for Mr Torbay and himself to have a meeting with Mr Hanna in the police cell. The junior constable was told by Cushway not to enter their visit in the custody book, a former detective involved in the investigation said. The charges against Mr Hanna were downgraded and he received a good behaviour bond. After leaving the police force in 2009, Mr Cushway was General Manager of the Guyra Shire Council. In February he was appointed Chief Financial Officer at the University of New England. So wasn't he a busy little Richard? Inside same edition's news review, the MP, the jail visit and the dole deals. Dining partners, former MP Richard Torbay inset with David Cushway, the Chief of Police in Armidale, who helped Richard Torbay sort something out for young Mr Hanna. Kate McClymont. The detectives at Armidale Police Station could not believe what they were hearing late on Friday night of June 29, 2007. They had arrested one of Armidale's richest men, property developer Philip Hanna. He's an old boy of De La Salle College, Armidale. His father, Joe Hanna, used to own it was a department store in town in those days. I'm an old boy of De La Salle College, Armidale, so I've, slightly connected to this shit fight. Philip Hanna, who was charged with the attempted murder of his business partner, but within hours of Hanna's arrest, their boss, the local area commander, David Cushway, who was on sick leave, and the high-profile local MP, Richard Torbay, held an unauthorised meeting with Hanna in the police cells. Cushway directed a junior officer not to record their visit in the custody book. Fast forward 6 years and Armidale is consumed by the mysterious recent resignation from public life of Torbay. It's all everyone's talking about, said one local. As well as resigning as the Nationals candidate for the federal seat of New England, Torbay quit as state MP and also from the prestigious position as Chancellor of the University of New England, where he used to be the managing director of the student union after getting an original job as a dishwasher in the student union cafeteria, but he was never a student and he never attended the university. Old mate, Richard. In February, Cushway was appointed to the $200,000 plus position as the university's Chief Financial Officer. Adding to the drama was last week's raid on Torbay's house and electoral office by the Independent Commission Against Corruption. A recent Herald investigation uncovered a string of property dealings in which Torbay, Cushway and others, including local developer Nick Rice, are involved. One of their companies, Palenco, owns a commercial building in Kurri Kurri which is leased until 2016 to Centrelink for a total of $1.8 million. Another of their companies, Dalbridge Developments, owns a building in Dalby, Queensland, which has a lease worth $2.6 million with Centrelink. Since then, the Herald has discovered that Torbay and Cushway's business partner Rice, as well as Hanna and his relatives between them, have leases on 14 Centrelinks. from as far afield as Tennant Creek in the Northern Territory to Deniliquin in the southwest of New South Wales, which have leases worth $48 million. The pattern appears to be that their respective development companies buy a building in a town and within 6 or so months, Centrelink chooses that building to lease. Rice's development company has also received millions of dollars in government contracts to refurbish some of these buildings. A former employee of Hannah's said that Hannah had a contact in Centrelink who provided information to him about what leases and sites were coming up. That's what ICAC's interested in. At 5 a.m. on the day he was arrested in 2007, Hannah had driven to his business partner's house with a 22 shotgun, it says. That'll be an over-under, 22 calibre one barrel, shotgun barrel the other one. Lady journalists don't know about guns. 22 shotgun hidden inside a rolled-up bundle of building plans. Hannah and his partner, Doug Jackson, were planning to make an early start to inspect one of their developments at Inverell, but in the pre-dawn darkness, as Jackson leant forward to turn on the kitchen light to make his mate a cup of tea, Hannah fired the gun. The bullet whizzed only millimetres above Jackson's head. Jackson and Hannah wrestled over the gun. He kept jamming it in my face and was trying to fire another shot, Jackson said. Her husband's shouts brought Robin Jackson running into the kitchen, where she found Hannah trying to wedge the gun under her husband's jaw. Once overcome, Hannah resorted to what he does best, bargaining. We got the gun off him, and then he offered me all this money to not say anything about it. First it was $300,000, then $400,000, Jackson said. Perhaps Hannah thought a deal had been struck because when police arrested him at a dinner party in Armidale that evening, the gun was in the boot of his Mercedes with a bullet hole through the plans it was still wrapped in. That same evening, Police Chief Cushway was dining at a local restaurant with Torbay, who had recently been elevated to the prestigious position of Speaker of the New South Wales Legislative Assembly. Other diners wondered what was going on, as Police Chief and the well-known local MP spent most of the night in a flurry of phone calls. Although Cushway was on sick leave, he got word from the station that Hannah had been arrested. Cushy wants to know everything, said one of the police at the station, who had taken a call from the boss. News of Hannah's arrest sent a raft of high-profile townsfolk into a spin. Many had poured money into Hannah's property trust, which in turn had invested millions of dollars in the Centrelink buildings. One of Hannah's previous employers said that before Hannah's arrest, he had heard Hannah speaking to Torbay about various developments and that he was aware that Torbay had invested in Hannah's property trusts. The former employee said that Hannah also talked about investments with his wife's cousin, Eddie O'Bede, who at that time was a power broker in the ALP and a close associate of Torbay's. And Eddie O'Bede's wife is Torbay's wife's cousin too, I understand. When Cushway's underlings got wind of the secret visit to Hannah in the cells, they were furious. Not only was it a breach of police protocol not to inform the officers in charge of the investigation of what was discussed in the cells with Hannah, but there was also the potential for the investigation to be compromised or evidence to be removed. The investigation was still in its infancy, and Cushway, allowing a close ally of Hannah and, for all we know at the time, a possible accomplice, to talk to Hannah was wrong, one officer said. It was well known Torbay and Hannah were close. Hannah was not only one of the largest donors to Torbay's campaigns, but when Torbay, who was the Armidale mayor, decided to stand for state parliament as an independent in 1999, Hannah was his campaign manager. The Herald has learnt that one of the last things Torbay did as mayor was to sign off on a deal to sell council land to a company associated with Hannah and Rice. The land was later used to build a supermarket complex. Back at the police station, one detective was so alarmed by Cushway's actions in organising the secret meeting with Torbay and Hannah that he began his own clandestine investigation. This officer told the Herald he collected all the CCTV footage and the swipe card records showing how Cushway had entered the building using a junior officer's card. He also discovered Cushway's instructions to another young officer not to record his and Torbay's meeting with Hannah in the cells. It took me a week or two to get it all done, and then I sent it off to the PIC, the Police Integrity Commission, he said. PIC made a preliminary investigation, then passed the material to the Police Internal Affairs, and that was the last he heard of the matter. Yeah, well, they have a special MEOCS, Middle East Organised Crime Squad, set up by the Labor Party when Eddie O'Bede was running the show, and they're supposed to catch on to swarthy Middle Eastern criminals, crooks and frauds, but apparently the criminals are running the MEOCs. Well, white-collar criminals anyway. Jackson was furious that when the matter came to court, the charges were downgraded. Hannah pleaded guilty to lesser charges. He did not spend one day in jail. Cushway resigned from the police in May 2009. He's understood to be collecting a pension in excess of $100,000 a year for that sort of police work. For a shoulder injury suffered while in the force, after a stint as General Manager of Guyra Shire Council, he was appointed the university's Chief Financial Officer. Cushway told the Herald he had never had any commercial dealings with Hannah. Of Hannah's arrest and prosecution, he said, "I was not a party to those proceedings, nor was I involved in any way in the investigative process. I am not authorised to comment further on such matters in accordance with the confidentiality obligations that still bind me." One person not surprised by the recent turn of events is Tamworth Magistrate Roger Prowse. For 2 decades, Prowse has dedicated himself to the pursuit of Torbay. Quote, "He perjured himself and perverted the course of justice, and in the process my client's life was destroyed." Unquote. In 1992, Prowse was representing a student, Tom Hudson, who was charged with stealing university student union cheques made out to the Armidale Youth Refuge. The cheques were signed by Torbay, who was the financial manager of the student union and the secretary of the refuge. The $20 cheques were payment for Hudson's hosting a lunchtime trivia quiz at the university. Hudson said it was Torbay who decided to pay him by cheques made out to the refuge, where Hudson was the coordinator. Torbay wrote to him explaining why he was structuring the repayments in this way. Torbay referred to it as, quote, "an administrative tidying up or rearranging the deck chairs," Hudson said. If Hudson was shocked by his arrest, he was even more shocked when Torbay did nothing. Quote, "I looked to Torbay for support, but it was not forthcoming," unquote, he said. At his later trial, requests for documents from the union as well as Torbay's letter produced nothing. Torbay gave evidence that the union's cheques were donations to the refuge. Under cross-examination, Torbay denied all knowledge of the letter. Hudson was sacked from his job and now has a criminal record. But mysterious things seem to emerge when Torbay stands for public office. In 1999, on the eve of Torbay's campaign to become an independent state MP, Hudson found a pleasant surprise in his letterbox. Bracket, "It was the evidence I had requested for my court case, including the letter sent to me by Torbay." Neither Hudson nor Prowse know who put the letter in Hudson's box, but armed with Torbay's letter, Prowse complained to various authorities to no avail. He warned the Nationals when they pre-selected Torbay, and this week he formally complained to the police. As to who was responsible for the most recent bombshell, which has seen Torbay being referred to ICAC, quitting public life and vanishing into thin air, no one seems to know. Do you know more? Lowercase KMC Climont at fairfaxmedia.com.au would like you to tell her whatever you know about Richard, the rise and fall of the man we call Richard Toupe, because he looks just like the real thing. Warbles on a lot to YouTube. Ciao.